With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful ends for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Zoweh podcast, Exploring More. My name's Michael Thompson. I'm with my friends today, S.J. Jennings and Big Greg Sailors. That's too many bigs. Big Greg Sailors.
I think we decided on Bear at
Bear
one point. Yeah.
Sailors. That's good. I like that. And then we're welcoming a newbie, a rookie, a freshman into the fold, David Burnett. And good to have you, David. Glad you're here, buddy. And we are going to be continuing our exploration of the masculine journey. Specifically, we're jumping in to the Ranger stage, and we're looking at this stage of, honestly, it's kind of puberty. It's a
mess, man. It's a mess.
It's preteen. What's that called? Tween. It's tween.
I've got one.
It's tween. It's preteen. It's teenager, and it is a rockin' mess.
Mm-hmm.
It was for our lives.
Yeah.
We are all dads at the table, and we've got boys and girls who are in it. And what I loved about this stage for my girls, because there's equivalent stages for the boys as well as the girls. We're talking about the masculine journey, but when I look at this stage and watching my daughters, now they're in their 20s, but when they were going through this stage, it was like, no, I remember this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, I know what this is. They might think they have, hey, it's all worse now, it's all harder now. It was pretty bad and pretty hard, in junior high. This is junior high in middle school.
Yeah,
high
it's
school.
just junior high, man.
And you talk about getting lost and being thrown into an ocean of other kids.
Lost hearts.
Yeah. And what a variety, man. What an amazing stage. And, back to a platform that we believe and we operate from. I mean, the context of this story, the masculine journey, is the greatest love story set in the midst of the fiercest battle. And so, yeah, how many casualties take place, how many compromises take place, how many trial and errors, how many experimentations take place in this stage. I mean, working with men, as we have the honor to do, this stage is loaded with recovery, restoration, redemption of things that happen to boys in this stage. And
meaning that, when we talk with guys and when we work with guys, we take them back. And so many of them, we have to take them back to this stage. God takes them back to this point in their lives. They're 12, they're 13.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much of that gets arrested.
And there's two sides of it. There's the things that happen to us at this stage. And then, if I'm honest, there's things I did.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There's things that I, did experiments that didn't go well. And so we will talk about, hopefully we'll run out of time before we have to
I'll
talk
go
about
last on that one,
stuff.
Michael.
I'll call on you. Let's go ahead, Greg. Why don't you share some more of that? But it's a very important conversation along the masculine journey. And if this doesn't go well, and as we're talking about it, it so often doesn't, then it does bring forward the idea in the next stages that we've already talked about, things that need attention. And we're going to continue even into next week, I think, is when we do the boyhood stage, that foundational stage, the beginning, and how your heart was handled there. But yeah, let's just jump in. Let me give some parameters. Let me give some description to the Ranger stage, and then let you guys react. Just respond a little bit to what you find, what you hear, where your heart goes. So the Ranger stage, it is that preteen. We'll call it as early, maybe as 8 or 9, and it can go into and through late teens, maybe even 20. So that's a decade. If you look at all the stages as give or take a year or two, they overlap, but this is the decade of, 9 to 19, 10 to 20, something like that. And it's a time where boys are tested. It's a time where boys are changing. And in that changing is where a lot of the testing goes. Physical strength becomes a component. I mean, you got 11-year-olds who are starting to think about shaving. And then in my case, it was 17, I think, for the first time I even saw something other than fuzz, right? So, there's a lot of disparity. There's a lot of difference even in these ages. But there's a question that a boy is carrying with him, and it has to do with strength. Am I strong? This is a stage where that question gets brought up a lot. Am I strong? Do I have what it takes?
Yeah, and it's the transition from, in boyhood,
right?
You go up to your dad or grandpa and, Dad, look, feel this, and it's different than that. It's not, it has to be more real when you're in this stage.
Because now it's not in the living room. It's actually with all the other young bucks.
Right.
It's with all the other young lions. It's in that arena that this comes up. Now there's comparisons, there's evaluations. You don't just get grades like in grade school or elementary school of pass or fail. You start being tested differently.
Yeah, there's some pushback with your friends and others.
There's a lot going on. So do I have what it takes? Well, what's this grade say? You're average, or you're exceptional, or you don't. So there's a lot of readout and printout. And
it really affects you at that age too.
Yeah.
And how you think about yourself, you're forming all those things.
No doubt. And we'll get to it in a minute. Having somebody to help you navigate this is critical.
Right.
That's why good kings make great fathers, and great fathers make good kings, because this stage is when usually you're in a young king stage, you're walking with your boys and girls into this, and it'll give you bruises on your knees when you have to hit it as often as we do sometimes to pray. So just to continue with this overview, so this is a season and a time where there's challenges, and a boy is either going to feel success or failure. And I know that's not the best way to live, but that's how it feels. You're evaluated, and yet you're not given much grace or mercy to fail, right? You don't know how to do things, and there's a lot of first times in this stage of learning how to do things. And we've said this for years. How do first times most often go?
Not very good.
Not so good. And so if it's success and failure and you feel failure, here comes that slithering snake called shame into the gardens of our hearts, and you feel less than, especially when you're challenged with opportunities to learn how to do something. So this is a stage where there's affirmation is needed, instruction is needed, and it doesn't go well if a boy doesn't have that.
Right.
Can I tell a quick story about that?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so I was probably maybe 13 or 14 years old and starting to grow, get pretty tall for my age. And I was always in the 99th percentile of anything.
Height,
yeah. And so I was entering into high school, and it was, kind of thrown about, hey, maybe you want to start looking at basketball. Well, I go down to this local park on a Saturday, and that was near my high school, and there's some guys there playing basketball. They were probably in college or 20s or whatever. They were playing a pretty serious game of basketball, and they needed a guy. Now, I had played basketball in the driveway, you know what I mean? But I had never played basketball.
Yeah.
So
that means you were chucking shots up there rather than shooting.
And I had no idea how the team concepts work and how defenses worked. And so they bring me out there, and it takes about a minute for, one of the guys to know that I didn't know what I was doing. And he kind of chewed me out, and I went back over to the bench and got my stuff, and left. It was one of those moments of you got to make a decision. Okay, so does this mean that screw you, I'm just done with basketball forever?
Yeah.
Or I'll show you. But it was a moment where I'm 13, 14, and maybe they thought I was older. I don't know the hearts of those guys, but I'll never forget that feeling of not knowing what I was doing and being diminished, like you said, by these older guys.
Yeah, you didn't know when you left that day for the park there was a test coming.
That's absolutely
your
true.
strength, your skills, they're going to be tested, and here comes shame. We get it, and you're 100% on target. Okay, here's the crossroads. Here's the crossroads that is so normal and yet so not good is I hate basketball.
Yeah. The flip side of that, of course, is the warrior that was the 20-year-old or maybe a older ranger had an opportunity.
Yeah.
And he didn't take it.
To say, hey, little guy.
That's right.
You've never played with a team before.
Yeah, set this game out, but stay here.
Watch what I do.
Yeah. That guy's objective was the score,
not the heart,
not the 14-year-old that he just called in, you know. And now his guys are laughing at him for this kid. I mean, it's just ripe with crazy.
Yeah,
and I think that's what. Go ahead, Dave.
Which way did you go with that, SJ?
I went towards a little bit of I'll show you. I went and tried out for basketball, even though, again, I still had all I knew was the ball was supposed to go through the hoop. That's really all I knew about basketball at that point, and went and tried out and didn't make the team, but wasn't devastated by that, you know. And I think I went back and tried out again, and I wasn't on the high school team, but I ended up on an intramural team or something. I don't remember what it was, but it didn't turn me off from it, you know, entirely, and got into watching the Celtics during the 80s, which was a good thing after that. But I do remember that moment very easily. I mean, it's almost like, and I think we probably all have these, you know, you have these memories, and it's like you go back in your mind and you touch it and you just feel that way again. Right. You know, it just, and I know it's true, right? I know what is true about me and what is true about those guys and how God sees me and what isn't. But it's still, I mean, just remembering that moment, you know, you just kind of get that feeling right in the middle of your chest of diminishment. You know, I can go right back there, even though it was, you know, 30 years ago.
And if those go untreated, like you said, then they can find a way to pop up again.
Sure.
You know, when you're in your 30s and you don't know what to do or feel like, you know, I mean, these become very embedded, and they need some loosening. They need some tending to, and I think, or even weeding out that wasn't your fault.
Well, to your point, I mean, you know, that produces a guy that says, I hate basketball. Well, no, it's not basketball that you hate, right?
Yeah, being shamed, embarrassed, diminished. Mm-hmm. So I wonder, I mean, how many of us have these stories in this stage? It's a great story. All of a sudden, you're accessing files I have of, oh, crap, man. I mean, this was girls start coming into this space. And, right, man, it's a stage of learning how things work. Yeah. And just like basketball, you don't know how to play it, but I'm talking about life. And now you're outside of the living room, you're outside of the yard, you're outside of that little jurisdiction where hopefully it's a safe place. Not all of us had safe places, and now you're out in the world. So we call it the Ranger stage because you are exploring. It is an adventure, and it's dangerous. And those don't go away.
Right.
They enter into this stage and they keep going. And you're learning how to navigate through that. You're learning how things work. Usually by this stage, you've already had a few trips to the emergency room, 8, 9, 10. I mean, you're trying to see how fast things go.
We can talk about some scars.
How high things go, how far it can go. I mean, you're learning how things work. And I know some of your story, SJ. I mean, your dad was in a wheelchair. He wasn't going to teach you how to play. Your brothers were older. You had another brother in music. Mm-hmm. So, it wasn't like you had, like some of us did as brothers. My brothers and I, we played those games in our driveway.
Yeah.
And so it's just a different deal, but it's still, I've got plenty of sports shaming.
Oh, sure.
Moments in my story, music shaming.
Well, it's like Gary
grades,
said,
academic shaming.
Gary Barklow said this at the weekend, the Heart of a Warrior Encounter weekend, listeners. This is 100% injury rate, just like the NFL or, you had a couple other combat, right?
Veterans. Yeah,
exactly. It's 100% injury rate. None of us get through unscathed.
Well, it is the years that we receive probably some of the biggest wounds. I mean, I know the beloved stage, the boyhood stage, we're going to talk about that for the next one, but I know for me, my biggest wounds and a few of my biggest victories came in those years. It's pretty tremendous. One particular story, Michael, of a wound is, with my dad, in my family, we loved to build. We were always building something. It's one of those ranch houses, kind of like yours, David, where you have the ranch, you build on a room, and you build a deck onto that room, you make that deck into a screen porch, and you build a deck on the next deck. That's the way our house sprawled around.
Ever expanding.
That's right. And so that's what I grew up with. And so my dad got me this set of a miter box, and he got me some wood and everything, and I made this bird feeder. I always liked birds growing up, so I made this bird feeder, and I put it on the tree, and I'm excited because he's coming home from work. And when he comes home, I go up to the truck, say, "Hey, I want you to see this. Please come see this with me." He comes down the hill, and he doesn't see the bird feeder, Michael. he sees the tools that I've left on the floor, on the ground, kind of strewn out about. He's like, honey, come on, man. You know you can't leave my tools out here like this. And he bends down to get a hammer, and he comes up and he hits his head on the bird feeder. And when he does, he gets upset, which is not normally my dad. I know this. But my heart was ripe for it at 8 years old. Tears it off the tree, and he throws it aside. And what does an 8-year-old heart have the opportunity to believe about himself, when that happens? And so,
don't build bird feeders ever.
Yeah.
Right? Don't.
Thanks,
Dad's
Michael.
mad.
Don't use the tools.
I mean, but to your point, your interpretive abilities are just
how do you do that?
Fragile and it's
And it happens so often in our innocence. And so for me, that was important for me. It's one of my more worse, if they're right. That's that right. More worse wounds. That I'd received.
Harder, heavier. Yeah.
I have a story, Michael, about this stage, and you guys know it a lot. You've heard it often, and it's in relation to SJ's sports story, and it's my Little League story, the baseball story. And the point of this is that a lot of times we don't realize the effect something has had until way later on in life. But with my height, I was coached to squat down and try to take the walk instead of swinging for the fence. So that's what I would do. So over time, I wouldn't even try to get a hit. I would just try to get on base that way. And what happened is later on in life, that told me that I didn't have what it takes, like the other kids,
to swing.
To swing,
right?
To swing for the fence, to try to succeed like that. And I didn't realize it until later on how I compensated for that message that I received in that. So,
there's all kinds of story. I think of a music teacher that it didn't go well. I wasn't ready for my recital, and she let me have it. So I determined I hate piano. No, you hate being yelled at. You hate being shamed.
Yeah.
You hate, I'm not saying I would have, been a concert pianist, but that ended piano lessons. I mean, and mom and dad were like, well, why? I just don't want to.
So much of that is back to interpretation because, I played baseball, as we've talked about this before, and our little guy, Chad, I love Chad. He hit in front of me. And so Chad would get on base. What happens when he gets on base? He's still second. What happens next? I hit a double. Do we score? Right. So I always wanted Chad to take the walk if possible. But I can understand both ways of how that works. And I know we're going to talk about how we interpret things a little later.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And in light of that, Greg, you guys have helped me to reinterpret that, in some of our time together. It helped me look at that differently from the same aspect of what you just said.
Right, but that's been recent, right?
Yeah, recent.
Yeah, so, that's the thing. That's part of the point we're trying to make, listeners, is that this is a journey that, you have these things in you for years and years and years.
You can, yeah.
And it's so important to continue this journey of unearthing, what you believe. Where does that come from?
Yeah, and these experiences mount up. We just said, how many first times are there? How many times are you trying to learn how to do something? And honestly, somebody else is kind of handling your heart. There's somebody in authority. You're a coach, a teacher. Maybe it's your mom or dad. You're kind of under their influence and under their way. And some of them weren't intentionally trying to hurt our hearts, and yet that's exactly what happened. And so processing so much of that, the boy can become fearful, or the boy can become really aggressive. I'll never be shamed again. You make high school all-stars out of stuff like that story.
Mm-hmm.
I'll shoot I'm going to learn how to play this. That'll never happen to me again.
Yeah,
or
I'm going to go back and humiliate those guys.
I didn't care about piano anyway.
Right.
These coping mechanisms.
False self-rep
start getting formed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, the boy who isn't given lessons or given the opportunity to fail and recover, he becomes fearful, or he becomes very intentional, and it becomes a space that he's going to, hell or high water, I'm going to show them. We make movies out of stuff like this. These are constantly the stories that we find where failure and loss becomes this either verdict on you or a motivating factor. And that happens so often at this age. And this is supposed to be a stage of trials and errors. To have a father who can walk you through this as a boy, really, really important. I think another big thing I got to say about this stage is it is a boy's entrance into the world of men. and listeners, we got guys at the table whose fathers weren't in a position to help. And there's something about masculinity that we've learned where masculinity is bestowed by and from masculinity. And to have a man, to have a good coach, right? To have a good father, to have somebody who's...
good uncle. Something like that.
And I think both David, you and Greg with your kids, I mean, you've got kids in this stage and you've got kids in younger stages. So all of a sudden, I want to just speak to the parenting idea. You're good men, you're good kings, you're good fathers, but you can't father, Sophie quite the same way that you're going to father one of your sons.
Yeah,
and same with you got one who's just entered this stage and one who's in diapers. So you've got these different stages and you've got to navigate that. What were you going to say, Dave?
Well, just last night, to your point, we were sitting at the dinner table, and I've got 3 of the kids there. So Sophie, the youngest girl, Gabby, my oldest daughter, and then Blaze, who's the younger son, which is 18. And we're having this frank conversation about boys in this stage because one of my other daughters was going through boy troubles and boy issues. And the conversation came up. I told him, I said, I wish I had, even though my dad was around, he did not talk with me about the things pertaining to girls at this stage and how to treat a girl properly. And so we're having that conversation around the dinner table, and I'm telling Blaze, I wish I had somebody speak to me about this topic when I was your age. So we're talking openly. So I've got my son there and my daughters, and it's just a great conversation.
Yeah.
About this, one of the issues in this area.
There's a word in that, Greg, that is important that it's really through the masculine journey, initiation.
Yeah.
Conversations like that initiate you into the stage. When it goes well, you can have validation, you can have celebration, you can have some kind of even ceremony. But to bring orientation to younger hearts in this stage, to bring clarity. I have 3 daughters, they're all in their 20s, and to even help them try to understand about boys without being overly indicting to my kind was an absolute. Was an absolute.
How'd that go?
That's got to be hard, man, to not slide into, boys suck, and stay away from them.
Stay away, run.
Because we want, them to have the true masculinity. They want,
right.
Yeah.
You want a healthy, give them a healthy understanding of what's going on, but at the same time, you got to be protective. I'm sure.
And to your point, we're all confessing this didn't go well.
For us.
And I didn't have a lot of good experiences as a dad with boys. There's something that we learn in this stage about girls and consuming.
Yeah.
Not protecting, not providing. It's more using. And so that's really, really a part of what we're up against still. Because we were there.
Yeah.
We were there in that stage.
Well, I think to that point, Michael, it's a time for us. I'm in my 40s. You guys are something else.
Older.
But it's a time of recovery for me now with my 12-year-old and my 8-year-old. And then with, your Panera stories, for example, I never had a Panera story. I never had a dad take me to Panera and talk to me about his daughter. And I've had some other men in my life that have a lot of daughters as well that would tell me and ask, hey, will you pray with me while I go talk to Michael? And so that started to happen. And there's really been a recovery from my heart. So that's one story. The second story, some of you guys that have been to our Heart of Warrior Encounter conference has heard me talk about my oldest son and having the sex talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked SJ to walk with me a little through that because he has an older son. And we help me remember, SJ, the name of the...
Passport to Purity.
Passport to Purity.
Family Life Ministries.
From Family Life. And my wife and I went through the material before we took Jackson through it. And oh my Lord.
Yeah.
For my heart.
It was for you, yeah.
It was for me.
Really good for you, yeah. That's awesome.
And Jackson loved it, but it was more for. I cried. It was a mess, but
because
didn't
God you have to pull over to the side of the road?
There was one time where something that he said, it undid me so much. I had to pull over. Chrissy, you've got to drive.
Wow.
Because
back to nobody told us, nobody walked us through that.
Right.
So I'm going to give a little more light on the Panera story in just a minute when we come back for a break. So we'll be right back with more of the Exploring More podcast, exploring the Ranger stage of the masculine journey.
Marriage may be the most sacred of all human relationships. Two people coming together as one. There may not be anything more powerful than two people walking with God together. It's kind of mind-boggling, actually. And because of the power and weight of marriage in the kingdom, it should not come as any surprise that marriage is violently opposed. It's a favorite target of the enemy. We believe this is why you don't have to look very far to find a marriage that is in trouble. Assaults on marriage and challenges to marriage are everywhere. But we at Zoweh know there is a way for couples to make a comeback. Learn how to fight back, enjoy being restored, and actually thrive in the midst of day-to-day battles of life. Marriage is worth fighting for, and having the right weapons and tools, training and orientation is crucial. That's why we created the Rendezvous Project, a 12-session video series recorded live during one of our recent Rendezvous Weekend marriage conferences. Through the Rendezvous Project, we hope to empower marriages to either take a weekend away together and host your own marriage retreat, or journey together in a weekly small group, discovering your true heart, the deep and beautiful heart of your marriage, the context of the larger story your marriage is in, and how to walk intimately with God together. For more information about the Rendezvous Project and to stay up to date with the latest news leading up to its release, visit therendezvousproject.com.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. We've got SJ and Greg and our friend David Burnett in the studio, and we're talking about the Ranger stage of the masculine journey, and left on the break with the Panera Bread. And I think really all I want to say about that, Greg, is the boys that were interested in my daughters, I would take them to a breakfast, and I just was interviewing them, wanted to try to share a little bit about my intention for my daughter and their respect of that. And there was a handful, 5 or so, that I got there. A couple boys didn't. I remember one that didn't. He was done even pursuing my daughter because he didn't want to go to breakfast.
Right.
So I became known a little bit for this Panera Bread thing. Yeah, not a bad reputation maybe. But the wild thing was, David, none of these boys' dads had talked to them. These are 14-year-olds.
0 for 6.
Give or take.
0 for 5.
0 for 5. None of them had been briefed by their dads about girls. So it wasn't just your dad. It's somewhat epidemic. I think a lot of men feel disqualified. And that happened in this stage. They might be 40, 50, or 60 years old. They have sons or daughters. And unlike you, Greg, they don't step up to that plate because there's some stuff in their stories that it still has power and weight, disqualifies them from speaking and talking about life and the importance of navigating this, like I said earlier, dangerous, adventurous chapters of a masculine or feminine journey.
Yeah, I think for so many guys, it stirs up shame. The thought of talking to their sons about women and sex and how that all works, it just stirs up shame for them, or because of their own stories, because of their own struggles, but also maybe because their parents never talked to them, their dad never talked to them about it, so they just feel disqualified completely.
Yeah.
And taken out in that area. And so their sons are left to figure it out on their own the way that they were left to figure it out on their own. They're repeating the cycle.
Yeah. Back to the middle school bathroom and the conversation, and the locker room. And where did we
the
get
way
it
boys
from?
are talking
where did we get it
girls
from?
And learning that. And aside from having a whole other series of podcasts on this stage and girls and the boyhood stage, because, there's men who didn't grow up and grow out of this.
Right.
They still are in that consumerism.
Right.
Even with daughters, even with sons, they're not walking in an oriented way, and they're actually perpetuating something that we're trying to take a stand against and move towards. Pornography comes in at this stage.
Yeah.
Literally, it's almost
the numbers are
100% that a boy from 8 to probably 12 is getting exposed in this current day. But it's not much. It's only a year or so later, back in the 70s, 60s, that pornography was finding us in our stories. So this is a stage that can get really arrested and really, really wounded, especially when innocence is being stolen, destroyed in different ways. We are often kind of living in the shadows. There's a whole other life in middle school and junior high and high school that our parents don't know. And honestly, we don't want some of our friends to even know.
Right.
And we don't want, if you even had this factor, you don't want God to know.
Oh, no.
Okay, that raised a few. I got a couple amens in there.
Everybody started looking down.
You're gonna have
we're
to
all
explain,
looking down at the table.
right? You don't have to confess, but what struck a chord there? Why was that
David, you're the new guy.
Wait a minute now.
Talking about initiation, bro.
Yeah, there we go. Baptism by fire.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that's the stage where it found me, and my mind goes right back to this. I don't even know where it was now, but a garage behind the school that I went to, and where me and another guy, I don't even know who he was, but we were up there rummaging through some stuff, and here's this magazine. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? And then it just something struck a chord like it does, and you're not the same. And then you're learning from people that know just as little as you. And it just a downward spiral from there.
Stupid on stupid, right?
That's right.
But I think the majority of men that we talk to in their boyhood, in this stage, they weren't looking for that.
You weren't looking for that.
It found them. Now,
I was looking for a new fort.
Yeah,
right.
That's right. Some nails to use, and garages, dad's or grandpa's closet. Or even walking in the woods. And finding an old fort.
Yep.
The enemy is at work, trying to sabotage, trying to do things, arrest things, like we've said, that they can get a return on 20 years later. So now that boy, and boys don't understand this, we do now looking back, and that's why we want to invite men to even think about and ponder this with Jesus, that what happened to me? What happened in my story? What's back there that I might be carrying with me today in some shape or fashion?
Yeah, it just, to your point, a lot of you may or may not know, but I'm married to my wife, Rebecca, is my second marriage. And so just now, and we've been married 6 years, since I have become aware of this whole awareness of the different stages and how to treat, a woman and so forth, I'm just now realizing at 51 what it's like from this area getting arrested years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Right.
And before you guys jump on that, there's a line here that I had written down. So remember what you just said. This is a stage where someone needs to be involved and engaged with a boy who can help interpret how he will handle success and failures and be able to speak words of instruction, initiation, validation, and correction. This is critical. So what you didn't get in this stage, here you're, in your late 40s and now, you've turned 50, it's coming.
Yeah.
Recovering with those kinds of instructions, initiation, validation, correction from the company of other men and from Jesus himself.
Yeah. And to your point, God will take us back. I think you said it earlier on, SJ, in our story to recover things that have been lost. And I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah. So I've got 4 boys, as most of you guys know. And as you said, Michael, I've got one that's about to turn 2 and one that's about to turn 13 with a 6 and an 8-year-old, in the middle of that mix. So it's interesting, and they're all boys, So when we were at our Heart of Warrior Encounter weekend not long ago, we watched, or Michael, rather, you were sharing about some of these stages of development. And if you remember, you had that picture of a bunch of little boys going down the steps in a box.
Yeah.
Okay.
Riding in the big box. Yeah.
So hopefully my wife's not listening to this, but while she was gone on her trip, we decided we got to do that.
Yeah.
And so open the door, as SJ, I think, helped me think
Yeah,
about that.
because your stairs go down right to your front
And
door.
4 foot boom.
So I
there's the
said,
door.
man, open the front door, let them go right out into the yard.
So what did we do?
Yeah.
We were riding the steps.
Nice.
So, with that thought, there's so much, again, of the stuff that happens in those stages. And the thing that really I have strided to do with my boys is give them permission. I want to say yes more than I say no.
Yeah.
I want to give them permission to mess up,
to try things.
And so there's
Right.
this quote by T.S. Eliot that I like. It says, "We shall not cease from exploration." This is exploring more.
Mm-hmm.
"We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." And that really hits my heart because so much stuff does happen in this stage. As we hear from Bagger Vance, right? We lost our swing. We got to go back and find it. And so much of this recovery of the heart is going back to these stages and recovering it.
So it's a stage of exploration. I said it's a stage of adventure. It's a stage of risk. It's a stage of, there's a reason. Going fast, going down. Seeing what we're made of, seeing if we can. And so a boy without any of those experiences, right? He's kind of the bubble boy, in the he doesn't know that he has what it takes. It hasn't been tested by physical things. And I'm not saying that you got to get your 8-year-old in the weight room. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, though, are you keeping him from entering into some of the bumps and bruises that come from physicality and entering into spaces where it doesn't mean you have to play football, but you're even learning how to run, play
how
games,
to jump off of things.
Yeah, this is a stage where when you think of adventure, right? Adventure's not an indoor thing.
No.
And I love books, and we're all that's fun, but getting out, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, that's one of the things that in guys who have a storyline, usually they have unless something got arrested in there, and that can happen. But merit badges, learning how to start fires, learning how to take care of things, learning how to plant something and grow it. I mean, this is stuff, a lot of lessons need to happen outside.
Yeah.
This may be a different season in time than when we were kids. We did not have all the distractions of phones, 400 channels, any show you want to watch anytime.
All the activities.
The show was either on or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And you watched it when it was on. Or you didn't get to see it. Yeah. I remember my son being in high school, and I said, son, you get to choose 2 things to do outside of academics each semester. That's it. Yeah. 2. Because he had a choice of about 11 teen that he could have chosen from, It's insane the schedules. There's travel baseball now that kids have. They're full. They're full. And a lot of kids'
lives are pretty full.
Yeah. So a lot of what you're talking about gets arrested by their schedule too.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And I thought about helicopter parents too. I don't know if you've heard that term, but the parents that no, don't jump off of that thing. I'll lower you down off of that thing. Just let them jump. Let them jump.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. One of my greatest memories when I think about this stage, I go back to when I was 14 and I got my first job, and it was working at a restaurant. A lot of us did that as a first job. And my mom co-signed a loan for me to get a motorcycle. So my mind goes to the motorcycle in this stage when you talk about exploring, adventure.
When you were 14?
When I was 14.
That's how you're going to get back and forth to work, man.
He looked like
that is awesome, man.
He looked like cool. He was 20 with that beard.
So here's what that did. That's before you had your license. And so my buddies had motorcycles too. So what we would do is, our houses were kind of, miles and miles apart, but we could cross the road. We could go down this power line. We could push it down this road. Now you can ride pretty much on a road and you don't get in trouble. But back then you couldn't. And we would hit railroad tracks. I think about the railroad tracks. You made a statement a minute ago about going down the step. Boom, boom. Mm-hmm. And you ever rode a motorcycle on the railroad tracks?
Mm-hmm. No.
Well,
you're not talking about across on the road. You're talking about on the
railroad track.
Cross ties.
You start out and you're just kind of shaking, and then the faster you go, you're just kind of cruising over them. But the point is that motorcycle took me on a lot of adventures. And fun. Before I had my license, so you're talking 2 years of riding a motorcycle around, and I loved it.
David, what do you brought up something huge in this stage. What do you think about money in this stage? Like you said, you had a first job.
Yeah.
A boy in this stage needs to start to feel the value of money. If mom and dad are just, keeping reaching for the billfold and they don't have any skin in the game at 14, 15, 16. I remember when we started going halves with our girls. They started babysitting, they started making money. And so the answer wasn't no. The answer wasn't absolutely yes at the department store.
Right.
If they wanted another shirt or they wanted some things, okay, we'll go halves. It's amazing how many of those things they put up back on the...
Just put them back.
Because it was their money. Right. They started to feel it's a 50% discount, but it wasn't enough. Mm-hmm. So how about money at this stage? Jobs?
I started early, like so many of us that are my age. I don't know that they even do it anymore, but I had a paper route. I think I was 7. when I started. Maybe
It's illegal.
No. Maybe 8 years old. No, I'm not kidding. My brother and I, we had the Cape Cod Times, man, and we had the thing. And a lot of times, if the weather wasn't nice, our parents would drive us, but we were on a bike or walking the route in our neighborhood.
I know.
And we had them. We were young when we did that.
But man, collecting was a big time.
We did it too.
The money.
Yep, the envelopes, and there's always that couple guys that
stragglers.
Yeah, the stragglers.
Mrs. McGreedy. Let me tell you.
No offense to any listeners named McCready, but yes.
You owe Greg.
But that's where it started for me. And then from there, once I got wheels under me, I worked at a grocery store. I worked at all different places.
Yeah, huge in this stage. I mean, to have a checkbook or back then, do you remember savings accounts? I mean,
the savings account book.
Savings account book. And, and learning principles of money, how it works, and saving it. And, I remember saving up for a car and that I got when I was 17.
I wanted to start a business so I could buy a car, so I was going to cut grass. And
I did that, yeah.
Dad helped me get a Lowe's credit card, and then I bought my lawnmower on the Lowe's credit card, and then I worked to pay it off.
That's a great lesson.
So
that's a great lesson. Yeah.
So talking about work and back to the motorcycle deal, it was $50 a month for 2 years. So that's what it was about $1,000, $1,100, something like that. Dollars. I still remember it. I remember paying it off too, and the feeling I had.
Yeah.
And then I think later on in that stage too, when we're talking about work, I'm thinking about hard work, and my mind goes back. I was probably 18. And it was in the summer, and I worked for a landscaping company. And what I did was weed eat all day long in the hot summer sun.
That's fun.
And I remember that job as the best and the worst, but for some reason or another, my mind always goes back there when I think about hard work and the first time, or one of the first times I experienced it.
Yeah, hard work's a great part of this stage. And helping our sons and daughters get into that is a part of our job as parents. I remember each one of my daughters, I know we're talking about the Ranger stage, but just the significant time at 16 when they had to pay for gas. Well, I got calls from them. Dad, I'm at the gas station. It's $20. I was like, yeah, I know. It's $20. We had an old Volvo that they all kind of got to drive as their first car, and putting that gas in at the BP, they found out real fast the value of, okay, I don't want to drive all over the place anymore. I'm not driving my friends around because they're not giving me gas money. Mm-hmm. That's a great way to learn a little bit of how the world works. And
we had one of these.
Some skin in the game.
It's funny too, being on the parent side of that. I mean, it's a little bit of vindication.
Wait for it.
Well,
that's right.
So we had one of these things just last night, or night before last. My wife Chrissy was gone out to Colorado with our allies, Ransom Heart at Captivating, and she was at that. But I was doing taxes, and I had a lot to do. And so the boys were kind of coming around, and part of me said, please just leave me alone. I want to get this done. But they were curious, and they were asking questions. And so it was like, okay. And I was figuring out how much money we spent on food in 2018. I just wanted to know because I knew it was a lot. With 4 boys. And so we did that, and they were like, holy cow.
Right.
That much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That much.
So very, very, very good Ranger stage stuff, and inviting them into that, Greg. That's great. I think as we wrap up, we all have kind of confessed of wounding in this stage, things that have happened to us. I just want to share a couple more thoughts. When there's failures, and there are going to be failures in this stage, and there's nobody there to help you interpret them. All these first times that don't go well, if there's nobody, mom, dad, teacher, coach, if there's nobody that can put their arm around the boy and say, hey, it's okay. Nobody does that well the first time, or invites us into a different interpretation than the one that we're kind of reeling from. I hate this. I'm not good at this. I don't want to do this. All those kind of things. And none of us want to do things we're not good at, but that's the point of, do we stay the course? Do we engage in homework, right? This is a stage in school where so much of the lessons are actually happening in and through school, right? Is your homework done? When's your next test? Now you can literally dial into a portal. You can log into a portal. Log into a portal of your kid's school, and you can see all the assignments and all the things going on. If you're, you don't even have to be helicopter mom or dad. You just boom. But I think particularly for boys, this is a stage where, entering into masculinity, entering into some circles where there's some men, it's nothing wrong with this, single parent moms. But this is an important stage to begin to move a son, particularly. Is there anybody that can step in and bestow masculinity from masculinity? That there's a movement away from mom's arms, protection, safety is good. It's a good thing.
That was our house growing up, Michael. We had 2 kids in the neighborhood, single moms. And my dad, although as we were all wounded by our fathers, was a really good man. And we were the community house because they knew if they came that Papa, a lot of people called him Papa, was going to love them that way.
Oh, you can father a lot more kids than just yours.
Right.
And that's a great story, great example of that. So I think in closing, just the idea that this stage, the question becomes, do I have what it takes? And so often the world and some of these stories, the answer is no. How has that been recovered for you men? How has that been reclaimed for you? Even though these stages there's things that didn't go well for us, but we're standing. We're here talking about it. Mm-hmm. How's God come for your heart to either heal some of those wounding moments or help you reinterpret some of those moments?
Well, I think, Michael, for me, and we're going to talk about it in the next episode, but going back to this stage, going back to the boyhood stage, from an adult perspective, being able to look back on some of those events, some of those moments, and to look at them with objective eyes, be able to let go a little bit of, at least for a moment, of the agreement attached to, for example, the basketball story I told earlier, that you don't know what you're doing and the vows and agreements that sprang out of that. Well, once you recognize that the vows and agreements are there, you can go back and start to do some of the work and say, wait a minute, why was I expecting these late teen, early 20 guys who just wanted to play a game of basketball to stop and teach me how to play? Why would I expect that of them?
It would have been great.
Where did that come from?
If they had.
It would have been great if they had, right? But why would I have that expectation? Well, I would have that expectation because no one else was showing me how to do it. Yeah. So just going back and unraveling those things allows you then to see what's really true about you, about others, and about God.
That's good, SJ. I needed somebody to put in the words the question that I was walking around with in my heart, in my gut, in my mind. And it was, do I have what it takes? And it's just you're kind of looking around and would somebody answer my question and would you answer it? Yes. I mean, so there's so much proving, there's so much striving, or you just hide because you don't want to be, but to have, for me, SJ, to have that question articulated and to have that oh my gosh. And I really didn't graduate with that stage, that question answered. I took it on in to many other stages, the next decades.
Yeah.
Do I have what it takes here? Do I have what it takes here?
I'm going to arrange for the opportunity for that to be true, because if I go into this certain situation or this thing that I know how to do, I know I'm going to arrange for that affirmation. And that's not healthy either, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And the reason I even brought that up was you were talking about an awareness. And that's where my awareness really began. When I heard the sentence, I was like, oh man, that's me. Mm-hmm. Somebody put into words what I was walking around with in that stage and subsequent stages. Do I have what it takes? Am I strong enough? Can I come through? And you're asking the world, which is a dangerous place to ask, and other human beings, which is a dangerous place to ask, to answer that question. And no wonder we walk around with hairline fractures of our heart, with broken, chipped spaces and places in our hearts. So,
with that, we had, as we talked about, those chipped places, but the arrested development too, and back to our Heart of a Warrior Encounter weekends, when we invite men to go out and spend that time alone with God, Father God meets them in those spaces and says, here, let's go do this together. And let's go back to the basketball court, SJ, and in imaginative prayer, maybe recover that. And, we know some of our listeners, and we've talked about it before, have had some pretty bad stuff that's happened in these stages too. God wants to make that new as well. And sometimes it's helpful to have a professional walk with you through it, Mike.
And we've thrown our email out there, and listeners have taken advantage of that, exploring more at Zoweh.org. If you can't find that guy or that woman who can help you with that, give us a shot. Give us a holler. We'll try to help. David, what about you? Yeah, how's God met you in the recovering of this stage? And
well, the word that stuck out with me when you asked that question originally was reinterpret. And I go back to my Little League story and how recent the reinterpretation has come for me. Only within the last year, we were sitting around, you guys were there, when we were talking, and I think Stephen, a friend of ours, brought it up, and he said, have you ever thought that you just interpreted that the wrong way? And he said, he went on to explain, your size, you could get on base, and then you could steal second, you're probably pretty quick. And my mind automatically went back to all of that stuff as being true. I would get on base, I would steal second, I would steal third, and like you were saying, Greg, I was in position to score if the guy got a single. But it was lost. It was lost in life and all of that until somebody had just, brought it up. Have you ever thought you interpreted that wrong?
When he first asked you that question, were you a little defensive and like, what do you mean if I interpreted
you were there?
It wrong?
I think you were there, and I probably was. I was like,
you were.
Yeah.
What are you poking at there, buddy?
But the more I thought about it, the more it was freeing. It was like I had been living under this cloud of diminishment and less than, and exactly where the enemy wanted me to be in that, not offering my true self, and just to have a different perspective was huge.
I wonder how many of these labels we wear. I wonder how many of these messages cling to us, because it's not a bad strategy for baseball runs, but it's not a good strategy for your heart. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
There's a difference. I think as we close it, listeners, there's just a couple things that we feel like maybe could help. Go back in your story with God. Ask him. Explore with him the events and the experiences of your boyhood, coaches you had, teachers you had, activities that you did, family members. I remember just recently in a daily orientation, some of my greatest memories, not my hardest memories, my greatest memories were around some of my big family events when we all got together. And, you sat at the kids' card table. You were somebody. This stage, right? We had the card tables set up that's where the kids sat, and the parents sat at the.
That's where you had dinner.
That's right. And those were great memories. I was somebody. There was a chair there for me. I was a part of something larger, and that was huge. So family, neighbors, school, friends, those are all places to kind of just spur your interest to go into the files of your heart. What happened to you? What were the eventful days, good and bad? And then, like you said, David, what are the odds I interpreted all of them accurately? There's probably a few in there that are incomplete, and maybe a few of them that are pretty heavy. And weighty, because some things happen to us in this stage as we've tried to share that are really, really challenging. So, we share this whole thing, the whole masculine journey, the exploration of it is so that maybe you could walk with God into your story and experience healing, restoration, and from there, freedom.
So worth it.
And it's worth it. It's worth going there. So thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, I mentioned earlier, you can hit us on email, exploringmore@Zoweh.org. You can also find out a lot more about Zoweh at the Zoweh website, ZOWEH.org. Greg and SJ have put a bunch of free stuff up there, a lot of free downloads.
Well, you just mentioned the daily orientation, Michael. Yeah. I mean, that's tell them a little bit of what the daily orientation is.
Yeah, we've written a lot of things and published a lot of things, and so we've taken a lot of those and pieced them into what we call the daily orientation, which is our 5-day devotional. You can subscribe to that. Go online at Zoweh.org and
scroll to the bottom.
Yep, scroll to the bottom, click it, sign up, and you'll get a Monday through Friday devotional. On Wednesdays, we call it the Wednesday Morning Rescue, and that daily orientation is actually part of an audio session from one of the conferences or audio book. You can listen to that and enjoy it that way. So you can find us at YouVersion on the YouVersion Bible app with our reading plans under Zoweh, ZOWEH, and just other things that we hope to encourage your heart and encourage you on your journey as you explore more of what it is to live life in the kingdom and to walk with God in intimacy, oneness, and connectedness, what you were made for. We'll see you next time. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.